He is a former federal minister and deputy chairman of the Planning Commission in the government of Pakistan between 1979 and 1980. He is currently chairman of Board of Trustees of the Islamic Foundation. He is also the chairman of the Institute of Policy Studies in Pakistan and the International Association of Islamic Economics in Jeddah. He has written, translated and edited over 50 books on Islam, Islamic economics, Islamic education and law. In recognition of his contribution to Islamic learning and da'wah, the University of Malaysia conferred an honorary doctorate on him in 1984. In 1987, the Islamic Development Bank in Jeddah offered him their first prize for outstanding services in the field of Islamic economics. In 1989, he won the King Faisal International Award for his outstanding services in Islam. This is only a brief introduction to the brother. Inshallah, the talk will be on understanding the West and responding to the West, because, as you know, tomorrow's talk is cancelled and both will be combined into one, inshallah. So if I could just quickly hand over.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulil Kareem. My dear young brothers in Islam, as it has been announced, inshallah, I would be trying to discuss with you the question of understanding the West and responding to the West. Some notes have been circulated which were actually notes on which I spoke to a group a couple of years back. Very frankly, because of time constraints, I would not be following those notes, although they provide you with a framework to reflect, and if you want to pursue your studies systematically towards understanding the West, I am sure those notes would be of some help to you. What I propose to do this morning is, first of all, to define two terms: understanding and then the West. Understanding must not be confused with criticizing, caricaturing, demonizing. Understanding is an effort to have as objective an appreciation and evaluation of something. Yes, objectivity has certain limits in any human effort. You start with certain assumptions, certain sympathies, certain biases. Yet, if we are making an effort to understand something, we must approach it with an open mind. We must approach it with honesty and integrity. So understanding, in my view, means having correct knowledge about something. To approach not from a distorted vision, but to try to see things as they are. And also to try to understand them from their own authentic sources, so that you can have a truly representative, correct picture, reflecting as best as possible something that you are trying to understand. The best example I can give to you is, of course, the ideal example is that of a mirror. In a mirror, you see things as they are, neither exaggerated, nor something left out, nor any distortion made built into it. Of course, that may be the ideal, yet for understanding that should be the approach. To give you an example, one of the leading Muslim thinkers, Ghazali, who has produced one of the most profound critiques of Greek thought. But before writing his critique of Greek thought, he wrote a book entitled Maqasidul Falsafa. And in that he presented the sum and substance of Greek philosophy with such comprehension, with such objectivity, with such balance, that that book is regarded as one of the authentic sources of Greek thought. After presenting their position correctly, then he wrote its refutation. Maqasid al-Falsafa, followed by Tahafut al-Falsafa. I have given this example so that you, our youth, who are our future, and it's from amongst you that future intellectuals and thinkers of Islam will inshallah emerge. So when you are trying to understand anything, you must try to understand them with honesty and objectivity. And then only embark upon its evaluation, its criticism, search for alternatives. Secondly, the West. Prima facie, the West is a geographic term, indicating a certain physical, geographic direction. And in Muslim history, Maghrib originally was used for what now constitutes North Africa, because that was in the west of the Arabia. In current terminology, the West is used in two senses. One, the Western Hemisphere, which covers Europe, Americas, and which also represents those countries which are economically developed, technologically advanced, and have been the dominant powers during the last 5 centuries. The word West is also used for Western civilization. And Western civilization means that civilization, that culture, which has been dominant in Europe and America, particularly during the last 5 centuries, and in the 19th century, which became a world influence, a world power. And as such, its influence was not confined to the Western Hemisphere only. Yet, Western civilization does not merely mean a geographic expression, it means a set of attitudes, a worldview, a value framework, certain principles on which individual and collective life have been organized, certain institutions. Because a civilization is the sum total of these attitudes, worldview, values, principles, institutions, which characterize a certain human society. So if a society has this cohesive force, has this distinctive character, that is known as civilization. In our discourse, we would be using the word West for both these dimensions, the geographic fact of certain powers which are dominant in world affairs, and also for the civilization which they represent. Although the influence of that civilization is no longer confined to the Western Hemisphere, and also challenges to their civilization are emerging both in other parts of the world and even in the Western Hemisphere. So having clarified this, let us quickly come to an understanding of what constitutes this Western civilization. In the notes that you have, you will find that I have also referred to the historical background. I cannot do justice to that in my today's presentation, so I skip that part of it. But only to refer to, in my view, there have been four major sources, historical sources, traditions, on which the Western civilization has drawn. First and foremost has been Greek thought and culture, then the Roman Empire, and from the Roman Empire, in my view, it had been primarily in the fields of law, organization, army, church, administration, and imperial ambitions that the West has drawn. Christianity. Christianity has been one of the major formative forces of Western civilization, despite its secularism, despite its atheism, and despite its anti-religious stance, and also Islamic faith and civilization. In a number of ways, particularly religious impact, under which the whole Reformation movement within Christianity emerged. Intellectual influence, under which the revival of sciences and thought took place in the West. Education and other institutions, because the institution of university, the institution of hospital, the University of Waqf, all these institutions have been developed in Western countries by drawing upon the Islamic model. And most importantly, movement from deductive method to inductive and empirical methods. That transition has been made, which lies at the root of present scientific, technological, and industrial revolutions. It was under the influence of the Muslim civilization that for the first time in this part of the world, the inductive method was introduced. Yet, Western civilization, despite drawing upon all these sources, has developed its own unique, distinctive traits. And that is what must be understood. The watershed has been the period of enlightenment, 16th to 18th centuries, when they tried to review their basic attitudes towards religion, towards ethics, towards reason, towards scientific methodology, towards political organization, towards society and institutions. And I have tried to sum up in 5 points the major characteristics of this civilization. First is humanism, which means that the center of our focus would not be God, Akhirah, life to come, but man and human society is the real domain of our study, our concern, our success, our failure. So a shift from the transcendental, the divine, the religious, towards having focus on man, on humans only. As a byproduct of that, it was thought that human beings can be changed, can evolve, the society grow by change in education, by change of institutions, by change of laws, by state. You don't need any change from within. That is the spiritual basis of man, Iman. So it was a shift and departure. That was the starting point. Its natural corollary was secularism. So secularism in the Western framework means that as far as individual and collective life of human beings is concerned, we do not need any external guidance. Allah, His prophets, His books, revelation, they are irrelevant. Whether they are there or not is a different issue. Even if they are there, we don't need them. The classic example is when Laplace, the French scientist, explained the working of the solar system. Napoleon asked him, Mr. Laplace, I don't find a reference to God in your explanation of the solar system. And Laplace said, Your Majesty, I do not need that hypothesis. So the whole secular concept is based on the irrelevance of the divine factor. Instead, human reason, human experience, human history should be enough to guide. There are some other dimensions of secularism also, which I am not touching upon at the moment. Two of them are important. First, many religions had ignored the secular life. Secularism affirms and asserts that these secular problems, worldly problems, have to be resolved. Islam has no quarrel with that. Islam deals with all the worldly problems. Secularism also is identified by the view that there can be many religions, many cultures, and pluralism, coexistence of them is something that is desirable. Islam has no quarrel even with that, because Islam accepts the plurality of religions and cultures. But our real quarrel is with this basis of secularism, that divine guidance, that permanent values, that God and His prophets are not relevant. That guidance is not relevant. Third, in the field of economy then, industrial revolution and economic factors becoming primary in deciding what is good and what is bad, what is desirable and what is undesirable. Industrialism or economism, whether it is capitalism or socialism or welfare state, the real core of all of them is that it is economic gain, it is monetary gain, it is pecuniary gain, it is physical pleasure, utilitarianism. That is the objective. So once you have lost that background, that perspective, and you are focusing only on man, then naturally you come to the idea of maximization of utility, maximization of monetary gain, maximization of pleasure. So consumerism, pleasureism, all of them are natural consequences. That is the third major aspect. Fourth, in the political field, they needed some new principle to organize collectivity. While individualism is one of the primary values of the Western civilization, society is not possible only on the basis of individuals. You have to organize them, weld them into some kind of a social organization. So, nationalism became the major ideology for that. Of course, nationalism has many variants. Territory, language, race, color, class. These represent many variants within nationalism. Yet, nationalism has been the consolidating force. And finally, the scientific method, the empirical approach, with the result of increasing man's command over natural resources, development of technology, and with the force of that technology, release of new power, new authority, new creativity, so much so that they were able to dominate over most of humanity. That is the core of the Western civilization. Let us realize that there is an element of truth in some of the fundamental principles on which this civilization is based. The worth of the individual, the question of human freedom, resort to empirical methodologies, effort to increase wealth, meet the needs of human beings, improve their quality of life, have some kind of a rule of law, institutions, constitutionalism, representative governments. These are positive aspects. Importance of education, of research, of inventions, of innovation, of effort, of sacrifice, of organized work, of ambition for creativity, for expansionism. These have been the factors responsible for their strength. But the major failure of this civilization lies in its brilliant one-sidedness. It lacks balance. Physical life is important. Worldly problems are important. Secular challenges are important. Institutions, education, rule of law, all are required for a healthy, progressive society. But the starting point of looking upon man merely as a bundle of instincts, as a conglomerate of atoms, just a physical existence, ignoring the spiritual, the moral dimension, that has distorted the whole vision of man in society. Because of that, individualism, which is important, became unbalanced. With the result that in capitalism, everybody for himself, and they will take the hindmost. Competition became a process through which the weak were eliminated and all wealth and power became concentrated in the hands of the few, the powerful. The idea of having a society in which powerful and weak have equal rights to live, to survive, to grow, to have opportunities was denied. Exploitation based on individual aggrandizement, class conflict, racial differences, color discrimination, linguistic differences, ethnic nationalism, territorial nationalism led to worst type of exploitation in society. Perpetuation of injustices, imperialism, bloodshed, disrespect for life, property and honor. Some of the sociologists have developed a very useful concept to explain that phenomena, and that is the concept of social capital. There is a physical capital, that is all those physical resources, monetary or otherwise, which are employed for further production. There is human capital, which consists of education, skills, training of individuals. But there is a social capital. And that social capital means that wealth of the society which integrates and welds people together into harmonious group, society, caring for each other, sacrificing for each other. And the most important form of social capital is family, civil society, religious groups. When you are sacrificing for others, look to the way your parents sacrifice for you. This is the social capital of society. And this is the cementing force. And when you move in the direction of materialism, neglect of the moral forces, neglect of the spiritual, individual only concerning for his own or her own welfare, consumerism, then erosion of social capital takes place. And if people who might have not only survived but progressed on the basis of the social capital produced in the past, when they do not try to make serious effort to produce and strengthen social capital, then this social capital will be inherited. It keeps on depleting. And that is how tensions, rivalries, wars, conflicts, crime, disintegration of the family, rise in divorce rates, single parent families, all these result because of that. And that is how civilization moves. Despite economic power, despite military power, despite political power, towards decline, crisis and disintegration. So let us be very clear that Western civilization, it has certain sources of strength and it has certain sources of weakness. And in the sources of weakness, the most crucial is this neglect of the spiritual, this denial of the real transcendental cosmic perspective of man. You didn't create the world. It was created for you. You even didn't decide to come to this world by your own choice. It was decision of some others that led to your conception and your birth. Born, you cannot even feed yourself. If you are left unattended, you die. You need that caring, that loving, that supporting mechanism. To ignore that and to regard yourself to be the sovereign is the most unrealistic, unnatural view. And a house built on that is bound to crack, bound to fall. So when we are studying Western civilization, at the civilizational level, while we must not ignore its positive aspects, we must not compromise or refuse or ignore its weaknesses. And that is why the present position is that 20th century, which on the one hand is looked upon as the apex of technological and scientific progress. Even when you have, on the one hand, reached the moon, approaching the Mars, resorting to genetic engineering, information technology, computer, cybernetics. On the other hand, this has been the most violent century of human history. All the wars, conflicts, epidemics responsible for death and destruction of human beings in the entire history taken together, this century has surpassed. According to reliable estimates, this century has consumed some 170 million people. The 98 years that you have spent, and the details, if you want, you can find in Brzezinski's latest book, Out of Control, where he has catalogued major wars and sources of this destruction, and he concludes that this has been the most bloodthirsty century of human history. Let me give you the thus, during the 20th century, no less than 167 million lives, and quite probably in excess of 175 million people, were deliberately extinguished through politically motivated carnage. He said, but all that, comparing to the earlier civilizations, but all that pales in comparison to the cumulative toll of about 170 million human beings destroyed by wars and totalitarian genocide in this century. So there's only one aspect. The economic exploitation. In the 18th century, the per capita income of India, of Ottoman, was slightly higher than the per capita income in most of the European countries. But last 200 years, such a transformation of resources has taken place that now only some 18% of the world population, and more specifically 6% of our world population, they control over 2/3 of the gross production, over 82% of the world trade. There had been foreign rules in earlier parts of history, and there is a very interesting book by Paul Kennedy, The Rise and Fall of Great Powers, where he has tried to chronicle different periods of foreign rule. But he says that in no earlier period, and particularly the Islamic period, there has never been any transfer of physical or human resources, forced transfer from the periphery to the center. It has been only during the Western colonialism that the so-called mother countries, they resorted to physical transfer of human and physical resources from all the areas where they ruled, which led to the impoverishment of many and enrichment of few. That has been real imperialism. And within the society also, the same exploitation has been going on. So this has been the darker side. And now, almost all major philosophers of history, starting with Oswald Spengler, his major work is The Decline of the West, to Toynbee, Sorokin, Northrop, Berdyaev, and the latest works by this Brzezinski, all of them are almost unanimous that the present phase of Western civilization is a phase of crisis and disintegration. Despite its political power, despite its economic strength, and despite its military reach, most important aspect has been the recent collapse of communism. In your own lifetime, Soviet Russia and its camp followers were a superpower, challenging the rest of the world. Then Khrushchev, at one stage, boasted that within the next 20 years, communism would destroy capitalism. But how that superpower has collapsed and is now becoming indebted to Western financial institutions. Its army is disintegrating. So history is full of such rise and fall of great powers. The mere fact that a certain power is dominant today is no guarantee that it will remain so forever. And the crucial challenge that confronts mankind today relates to this disharmony, disbalance between the moral, the spiritual, and the physical, and the material. Let me just give you one quote from Brzezinski, where he says that what would be the need of the 21st century and all will have to seek a more explicitly defined balance in the modern world between the material and the spiritual dimension of life, especially in the purpose of global politics is increasingly defined as the progressive shaping of the global community with gradually equalizing opportunities for human fulfillment. He says the American society cannot be the model for the world, both morally and a matter of practical economics. If a predominantly cornucopian ethic defines its essence, while a sizable but impoverished minority is simultaneously excluded from meaningful social participation. Preoccupation with the satisfaction of material desires that are growing more and more out of control can only perpetuate and deepen the objective and subjective gulf that is deadly dividing mankind. And he concludes, in fact, one more quote, the real alternative to total control is not minimal control, or even worse, the absence of any self-restraint, but public self-control that is derived from some internalized and self-restraining notion as to what is appropriate and what is not. So he concludes, the global crisis of the spirit has to be overcome if humanity is to assert command over its destiny. The point of departure for such self-assertion must be awareness that social life is both objectively and subjectively too complex to be periodically redesigned according to utopian blueprints. The dogmatic certainties of the modern age must yield to the recognition of the inherent uncertainty of the human condition. In a world of fanatical certitudes, morality could be seen as redundant. But in a world of contingency, moral imperatives then become the central and even the only source for reassurance. Recognition both of the complexity and the contingency of the human condition thus underlies the political need for shared moral consensus in the increasingly congested and intimate world of the 21st century. So, my friends, in the situation where we are today is a threshold. A threshold where the future of mankind very much depends upon a fresh start, a rediscovery of the balance between the spiritual and the material. Self-control and a value framework where what is good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what is just and what is unjust. It is that moral framework which can make the 21st century a better era to live in. So that is my point of departure to come to the second part of the question, responding to the rest. In my view, the Muslim Ummah is in a very historic position. I think it is a great blessing from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that 20th century, which began at a time when almost the entire Muslim world was under colonial rule. We are approaching the 21st century at a time when overwhelming, only a few areas are still under colonial control, otherwise 56 independent Muslim states with about 900 million Muslims, about 80 Muslim communities in the world with another 400 million Muslims, approximately 1.3 to 1.4 million is the present Muslim population. More than one-fifth of the humanity. The land area under Muslim control is about 23% of the land area of humanity. Economic resources, manpower. Despite educational disparity and technological underdevelopment, there are at least 12 Muslim countries which have reached the stage of semi-industrialization with education, human capital, technology, which can be the basis for a takeoff. Yet, we find that there are certain weaknesses from which the Muslims suffer. If we are objective and honest in forming a picture of the West, both its positive side as well as negative side, we must do the same for ourselves. Our greatest strength lies in our faith, in Islam, in the code of life that Islam has given, in the historic tradition of which we are proud. Iqbal has very beautifully put it in one sentence, and he says that when I look upon Muslim history, I find it's not the Muslims who have saved Islam. It is Islam that has saved the Muslims. So that is our greatest source of strength. Along with that, we have now political opportunity. 56 independent states, economic resources, human power, access to technology, and a technological and information revolution in the world, because of which transfer of technology, access to technology, and command over technology, its opportunities have increased. It is becoming more and more difficult for the Western powers to have their monopoly on technology. So access to technology and access to information is our source of strength. But where lies our ignorance? Our weakness? Our weakness lies in our ignorance of Islam. Particularly, consciously or unconsciously, even the Muslims have tried to divide life into watertight compartments. Prayer, fasting, Hajj, Umrah, even Zakat, they are religion. They have forgotten that Islam called them arkan, pillars. But have you ever thought what pillars are for? To have a structure, to have a building. If there are pillars without building, then it's like global monuments of a dead civilization. So these pillars in Islam were to build a house, to have a building, to have a structure, to have a society, to have a model. But somehow we have also become confused with it. And that's why the reawakening of the original Islamic vision of a way of life, of a dawah, of a movement, of a force for change, a culture producing, history producing factor, that is important. And I was so happy when I came that the couple of presentations that I heard some of you making, I could see that vision of Islam as a faith, Islam as a way. Islam is our future. Islam is the future of mankind. So if that vision is there, then we would be able to surmount this difficulty. Economic mismanagement misuse of resources, allowing these resources to be used for the benefit of our enemies. And the frequent Gulf wars of which you are listening and witnessing, if you go deeper, you will find all these are machinations. On the one hand, of mismanagement, misuse of our resources. On the other, effort to control and manipulate these resources. Do you know how much is the total indebtedness of all the Muslim countries of the world? It's less than $500 billion. And do you know how much was wasted in the first Iran-Iraq war? Those 8 years. Now their total cost is coming over 1.2 trillion. And 1 trillion is 1,000 billion. The second Gulf War, there was only 41 days. But what was its cost? Arab Development Fund has calculated it $670 billion. The current situation. What is it? An army is being supported by the Muslim money. Oil prices are being kept down. You must have heard of the humanitarian oil sales of Iraq. But do you know that 1/3 of that 2 billion is given back in the form of reparations and the expenses of the inspectors, over 450 inspectors who have been busy for the last 7 years. Only 2/3 is given in the form of so-called aid, but that too is managed by the UN. So it's a kind of UN trusteeship of Iraq. All the forces that are staying in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait, in Bahrain, they are paid by Muslim money. As you rent a car, you rented a superpower. So that's our affairs. So unless we are able to control our own resources, manage them properly, others will keep on utilizing. This unity, a leadership that has no roots in their own country, who are in collusion with outside powers. Therein lies our weakness. Let me read out to you a very interesting sentence from the same book, Out of Control, where he says that why Muslims cannot become a power. And he admits that it is so because of the Muslim disunity, which is deliberately supported and strengthened by the Western powers, so that they could control the resources of the Muslims. It has come out so clearly that I thought I should read that out. I've given you the actual wordings of this former advisor to Carter are that Muslim disunity supported deliberately by the world powers to have control over their economic resources. That lies at the root of all. So we have set our house in order. Then, how should we look upon the West? In my view, we need a multi-dimensional strategy for that. The Muslim Ummah on the whole, the Muslim countries where we are in majority, and Muslim communities, those who live in the West or anywhere in the world. So all of them should think over these problems and see what role each one can play towards that. My analysis is that it would be a folly to look towards the West as a friend. Because, for two reasons. First, and primarily, the political ambitions, attitude of the West towards Islam and the Muslims. They have demonized Islam. They look towards Islam and the Muslims as a threat. They have exploited Islam and Muslims and want to continue that position. They are a hegemonic force, and you can never be a friend to the power who has hegemony over you. But then should we look upon West as enemy? And my answer again is no. It would not be fair to regard the West simply and exclusively as our enemy. Why? I differentiate between the rulers in the West, the vested interest and establishment that support these rulers, and the people. People are not necessarily a party to it. Within the West, within every Western country, you will find Muslims, you will find good people, people who are dissatisfied with their own system, who are yearning for change, who are aspiring for change. So it would be unfair, undesirable to look towards the West either as a friend or as a foe. Then what should it be? In my view, we should look towards the West as an opportunity, as a possibility for dawah. And that is what our role as Shuhada al-Nas wants us to be. We are a people with a message, people with a mission. We cannot be enemy of anyone. We are enemy only for batil, for kufr, for shirk, for taghut, but not for human beings. We must be sympathetic towards all human beings. We must have an openness, and we should be prepared to even learn from those who are arrayed against us without in any way becoming imitative, apologetic, submissive, alienated. No strategy of surrender, no strategy of retreat, no strategy of isolation. Instead, we should regard the whole global situation as an opportunity, as a possibility for dawah and dialogue. But this is possible only if we prepare ourselves to aware of this opportunity. Opportunities do not materialize without effort. Even if I want to take a sip from this glass, the glass would not come to my lips. I have to take it to my lips. In the same way, every opportunity calls for effort, calls for preparation, calls for planning, calls for determination. So, in my view, these 6 requirements are which should be fulfilled by you, by me, by the Muslim Ummah everywhere. We should not look upon West merely as a rotten pot. Yes, there are rotten elements, and our effort is to salvage whatever can be salvaged. Our attitude should be that of a doctor who is all sympathy and care for the patient, but who fights the disease. And even if he has to use the surgeon's knife, the surgeon's knife is used not to take life, but to save life. And only to remove those parts which can no longer go with a healthy body. So what is needed is, number 1, clarity of vision. It's your duty to study Islam, to understand Islam, to develop a commitment to Islam, and to make it a continuous, unceasing effort. Just reading 1 or 2 books, just reading the Quran once or twice is not enough. If Quran is our guide, if Islam is our faith and destiny, then we must constantly try to improve our knowledge, our understanding, our conviction, our commitment. Muslims have been overtaken by others because we are no longer leaders in knowledge. It's only those who are leaders in knowledge who lead the world. And those who lose or drop the reins of knowledge, they become passive, become followers for others. Quran asks us to acquire knowledge. The very first revelation was Iqra, based on Iqra. Iqra, Iqra. God, who has taught you what you knew not, taught you with pen. First thing that was given to Adam alayhi salam, Allama Adam al-Asma'atullah. Knowledge was the first thing. Rabbi zidni ilman. The prayer the last prophet has taught us. Allahumma inni as'aluka ilman nafi'an. Oh my Lord, I seek ilm that is beneficial. So clear vision and leadership in knowledge. Second, dedicated effort. Those who are lethargic, those who sleep over opportunities, those who are not prepared to sacrifice and make effort, they are nowhere. You can carve out a place for yourself only through effort. لَيْسَ لِلْإِنسَانِ إِلَّا مَا سَعَى. Quran says that for you is what you strive for. Jihad is our way. And jihad means continuous, unceasing effort and struggle. It's not merely brandishing the sword. Yes, sword and military action has a place in it. But jihad is a continuous, lifelong effort. Third is discipline and taqwa. The dimension which is missing. It is only through taqwa that social capital can be built. It is through taqwa that physical resources can be utilized in a manner that the result would be 111 times more effective. Fourth is dawah. Muslim can never be just looking towards himself. By definition, the Muslim has to be outward looking. You have to reach others. In your own house, in your family, in your schools and colleges, in the bazaar, in the community, wherever you are. It is a sad phenomenon that I don't see amongst you a British Muslim. Why? Because we are trying to talk to ourselves. We are not trying to reach the community. Dawah is an integral part. And dawah should define our role and our attitude. Fifth, I call deterrence. By deterrence I mean building enough strength and power. That's what Quran has said. That be in a state of readiness so that it sends a message to your enemies that you are not an easy prey. There is deterrence. And deterrence is physical, economic, military, scientific, technological, in all the fields. And finally, a unity with decentralization. Over-centralization kills initiative and regional opportunities. So there has to be unity, but a unity based upon equity, variety, multiplicity of opportunities. Islam stands for unity, not uniformity. Islam stands for oneness, but not a centralization which saps the initiative at other levels. That's why in the Quran, the two characteristics of Islamic Ummah, along with its mission of Shuhada al-Nas and those who call towards khair, make amr bil ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, is that in the hazihi ummatukum ummatan wahida. And you are ummatan wasat, litakunu shuhada al-nas. So wasat means balance, avoiding extremes, being moderate, being central, being pivotal, occupying that position that human race should depend upon you. And also a unity that is based on obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, not your personal dictatorship. So, my young brothers, the recipe for a powerful response which could produce a new culture, a new civilization, a new faith in history should be based on these principles.
Jazakallah khairan for that wonderful talk. As you've realized, we've gone over time. The main reason for this is that we usually have very little opportunity to have Brother Khurshid to talk to us. That's why we extended the time, and I hope no one mind. Inshallah, we'll just have a few questions for about 15-20 minutes, and then we'll go off to pray.
Regarding the current issue in the Gulf, would you say that the current issue that's happening in the Gulf is a manifestation of the US's dictatorship, and how are the Muslims supposed to respond to that?
Definitely, it is hegemonistic attitude of the United States of America, which is now being acknowledged, even abhorred, by those who were with the United States in 1991 coalition. Russia, China and France have come out openly. Even among the Muslim countries, those who are almost in their grip, even they are reluctant. Turkey and Saudi Arabia both have so far at least avoided doing the American line fully. And it is very interesting if the story is correct, that when Merlin met the Crown Prince and tried to pressurize him, he told her a story. And he said, Madam, we are Bedouin people, and sometimes our raw understanding comes from our proverbs. So there is this proverb amongst the Bedouins that a Bedouin had a large herd of sheep. But somehow there was a wolf after those sheep. And every day one sheep was devoured by the wolf. So the Bedouin was very upset, and he was advised to develop a protective mechanism. So he acquired very high-bred dogs to protect the herd. But then he found out that he had to sacrifice 2 to 3 sheep every day to feed those dogs. So the foreign secretary said that, I understand, wolf is Saddam. So you can realize who are the dogs. So this is the game. My view is that 91 may not be repeated in 98. Although America is capable of that. They are trying to make a scenario, but the situation is different. And if this, God forbid, happens, the long period consequences of that would be against American interests in the region. And it would accelerate anti-American, anti-Western feeling in Muslim world. But the problem is that America has its own domestic as well as internal problems. And that's why Clinton is trying to pose in a manner that he's going to strike. Let's see.
Can you speak up, please?
Two questions. First one again about Iraq, the different aspect. I agree and follow your analysis, but there is a new resolution which planned to pass with group support, which gives the UN the power to see investment in the economy. So basically, that would prove your
Investment
in the economy, industry, and so forth. Yeah, the resolution. Now, if for example they were to do the same thing to other Muslim countries, find a cause for war, and then go and send the UN and send a resolution and take over these countries and effectively running, would that be a new form of colonialism? Do you agree with that?
Fine, I'll take it up.
Yeah. The second one is about the contribution of the Salafiyya and the Hizb ut-Tahrir movements. What contribution have they made towards the Islamic Revivalist movement? And the second part of which is what impact have they made on the Islamic movement, especially in reference to this country?
As to the first question, first of all, there is no legal or moral basis for punitive action by America in Iraq. The UN resolution, there are 2 UN resolutions. One is which says that as Iraq has invaded and occupied Kuwait, the UN Security Council authorizes the coalition to take all necessary steps to seek the vacation of that occupation. Now that was passed before actual military strike in January 91. And America is trying to draw upon that, but that was specific to the Iraqi occupation of Kuwait, and once that has been evacuated, the authority to use force has finished. Second one is the ceasefire agreement. I think 786, in which it has been said that as a part or one of the conditions of ceasefire, that Iraq shall open up its arsenal to UN inspectors, and they would have the authority to destroy them. But in this resolution, there is no provision for any punitive action if Iraq or anyone else does not fulfill. The punitive part is only in the earlier resolution, not in the resolution. That is why Britain is saying that we need a fresh resolution, so that the moral and legal authority of the Security Council could be invoked for any action. America is not prepared because they know that their resolution will be vetoed and they would not be able to get it. So they are trying to just play upon confusion and words. And what is more interesting, America has recently signed the Chemical Weapons Convention. And in that Chemical Weapons Convention, there is a provision of inspection, and also a provision that if there is a report about any chemical weapons being available or being manufactured, then within 2 weeks' time, the UN inspectors would be allowed to go and see. Now, America has already passed a law in Senate. It has to be approved in the Congress, where there are two provisions, and that is that America would be prepared to open up its chemical arsenal or factories for inspection. Number one, except where the President has the discretion to exclude certain areas in the national security of the United States. And secondly, the President also has this discretion to object to the nationality of the inspectors. And actually, they have objected to two inspectors only 2 weeks back, one Iranian and one Cuban. Now the same things have been replayed in Iraq, and America is planning to bomb them for that. It's sheer hegemonistic policies, sheer imperialism. Yes, if they are allowed to do it, that would become a precedent for other countries in areas. And that is why they should be resisted. We have no soft corner for Saddam himself. And Saddam has been a creation of these very imperialist powers. He has been armed to the teeth by them. And latest evidence shows that some of the chemical material had been supplied to Iraq up to 1994 by Britain for money. So they patronize and they penalize. It's part of the game. Even the Saddam's occupation of Kuwait, there is a question mark. Because the American ambassador to Iraq, she is on record that she talked to Saddam herself and said that even if you make an adventure in Kuwait, America would not retaliate. Tony Benn, only recently, has written in Guardian that Saddam told me personally that I was assured by the Americans that if I go into Kuwait, there would not be any retaliation, and I was betrayed by them. And if you read a very interesting article that appeared in Newsweek in September 96, in the context of, the Kurdish issue, when America had tried to send its Air Force, the managing editor of Foreign Affairs, one of the leading American foreign policy magazines, he writes that Saddam is essential for the continuance of American policy in the region. Had Saddam not been there, Saudis and Kuwaitis would never have paid us, would never have allowed us to have our forces there. Even now there are thousands of tanks and artillery on Kuwaiti soil. There are over 30,000 persons in Middle East American forces, over and above the naval fleets that are there now, and all of them are paid by these countries, only because the red herring of Saddam is there. So they would not like to remove Saddam. They would only like to see that Saddam's threat appears from time to time, so that the dependence of these countries on America continues, and they continue to exploit them. That is the game. Globalization, privatization, opening up of markets to Western products, opening up of our capital markets to multinational corporations, these are the contours of the neo-colonialism. And they are being forced down throat because America still follows a protectionist policy. The European Economic Community is following a protectionist policy and have been given 13 years grace period for opening up their markets. But we are being forced to open our markets. And those of the East Asian countries which are trying to make a mark and attain some kind of self-reliance, they have been penalized along with some of their own mistakes. It's not just one way, but because of their own mistakes, they have been penalized, weakened, and message conveyed that as long as you follow our dictates, you have a right to exist, otherwise we can destabilize. As to your second question, that calls for a very different type of presentation. It's not very relevant to my today's speech, but in a few sentences I will reply. As far as the Salafi movement is concerned, originally it had been a part of the revivalist Islamic movement, beginning with the Wahhabis of Muhammad al-Wahhab in the 18th century. It has made a very important impact both on thought and the evolution of Islamic movements and Islamic dawah and Islamic activism in the Muslim world. But somehow now it has shrunk into just an inward-looking, rigid, ritualistic approach. And unfortunately, ignoring the real political dimension of Islamic dawah in the old times. It has become an apology for certain states and not a representative of the original revolutionary and challenging message that was given by Muhammad al-Wahhab. That's why what they are presenting as manhaj of the Prophet is virtually leading to a division between Islam and society, Islam and politics, and a justification for the continuity of monarchy and despotic rule and absence of human rights, political processes, elections in the Muslim world. I am very uncomfortable over this dimension. As far as Tahrir is concerned, its antecedents are very doubtful. It emerged originally in the Balad al-Sham, not as a force to support the Islamic movement, but to oppose the Islamic movement. And when Islamic movement was suffering from persecution from despots, the revolutionary urge, which is very common and natural among the youth, Hizb ut-Tahrir tried to capitalize on that, harness it, and is playing upon that. It lacks a coherent, clear-cut program based on original Islamic message. It has helped some Muslims, in particular youth, in not degenerating into kufr or fisk. And to that extent, I would not marginalize or ignore their contribution. But the target that they have given, in my view, is not well thought out, is not realistic. Khilafat does not mean the reinstatement of the institution of Khilafah, which was abolished in 1924 by Usman Ali. Khilafat is a dynamic concept, which means that every Muslim has to act as Allah's representative and deputy, with a view to establish the supremacy of Islamic law, Islamic Sharia, Allah's will, on all parts of individual and collective life. Istikhlaf. But that istikhlaf does not necessarily mean a restoration of something which had become a caricature of Islam and Islamic State. Istikhlaf means a revival of Iman, the development of Islamic character, the dawah of Islam, and that dawah keeping in view the condition in which you are. You cannot establish Khilafat in UK. Although we believe in the establishment of Khilafah all over the entire globe. So hikmah and strategy has to be such as to see what are the priorities, what are the issues, and how we should achieve our objectives. And in that, in a manner that we do not expose ourselves to a situation where Islam is misrepresented in a society where there are so many misrepresentations, distortions about Islam. We have to become true ambassadors of Islam. I had the misfortune of seeing the TV program which tried to present what their position in this country is. And I regard that to be a total misrepresentation of Islam. Islam is not intolerant. Islam is not against any human being. Islam wants to win over every human being. The Prophet ﷺ came as a Rahmah, as a blessing for mankind. Islam is light and not darkness. And Islam is not to be served by those people who would carry in their company a representative of the enemy for 4 years, take him to sensitive places, try to impose him upon the Muslim community, and then afterwards lament that he betrayed me. You should pity your own intelligence. So that is not a service to Islam. And if that is what is being done, without in any way being inimical to them even, and as I said, they have served a partial purpose by at least saving certain youth from fisk and from kufr. To that extent, we should be polite, we should be understanding, And we should try to see an opportunity, because those who have gone to them have not gone for violence or terrorism. They have gone there because they had a yearning for truth. We failed to reach them and win them over. So we must not rest with that. We should try to approach them creatively, sympathetically, but we should also try to tell them that Islam is a message of love and affection. And Allah has sent all His prophets to save human beings from fire, not to throw them into fire. So let us adopt a method, a way, a language which is in keeping with this sunnah of all the prophets, and particularly of Sayyidina Muhammad.
And one last question, and we'll finish on this one. You said in your lecture that we do not have a white British Muslim person here, but many are turning to Sufism. What is the position of Sufism within
By
the...
our words, by our character, by our morals, by our concern, and by inviting them to face common challenges. That was the purpose. As far as the two aspects of the question that we have raised are concerned, I will very briefly touch upon them. Why so many British brothers and sisters are going to the Sufi orders in this country? We must think over that. The reason is they are fed up with hedonism, with materialism, with consumerism, with the exploitation they see around, the poverty of spirit with which they are afflicted. So they are trying to move towards something where they can have that spiritual fulfillment. They could have that affection and love, that human dimension that they are lacking in their own society. Now Islam has it. Why is it the Islamic movement is not attracting them? Do we lack spiritually our programs? Because we must realize that while Islam is a way of life, Islam is a program, but the foundation on which Islam builds this is spiritual. Islam is a discovery, a moral discovery, a spiritual discovery. And unless you have that Islamic identity, the Prophet ﷺ has put it beautifully when he says, ذَاقَ طُعْمَ الْإِيمَانِ مَنْ رَضِيَ بِاللَّهِ وَبِمُحَمَّدٍ رَسُولًا وَبِالْإِسْلَامِ دِينًا. He who has become satisfied, content with Allah as His Rabb, as Sayyidina Rasulullah, as His Prophet, Islam as His Deen, he has the taste and the flavor of Islam. Zaqatum alim. Which is that zaqatum which is missing. And unless we cultivate that, we create that, and we demonstrate that, we would not be able to attract those who are suffering from the consequences of this poverty of spirit. Now what is tasawwuf? Real tasawwuf is an integral part of Islam. It's not something outside Islam. It is within Islam. What is taqwa? Taqwa is remembrance of Allah, closeness to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, living in His presence. The Prophet ﷺ has explained it that Iman, Islam and Ihsan, these are the three dimensions of Islam. Iman is this conviction, discovery and commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His Prophet, His books, His angels. Islam is living according to this Iman. That is Shahada, Salat, Saum, Zakah, Hajj, Jihad. But Ihsan is the spirit, is the way. All these things have to take place. And the highest manifestation of that is that whatever you are doing, you do in such a way that you are seeing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because even if you are not seeing Him, He is seeing you. So everything has to be done with this feeling of His presence. We should have that sweetness. That's why the Prophet ﷺ said that there is a piece of flesh in your body. Muslim. فَإِذَا صُلِحَتْ صُلِحَتْ كُلُّ. If this is corrected, this is reformed, the whole body is reformed. If that is corrupted, polluted, the whole body is polluted. And that's your heart. So real tasawwuf is this heart. So that we have a heart that is awake. Qalban khashya, sakir. A qalb that is always full of remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. This is tasawwuf. Tasawwuf is nothing outside Islam. It is internal to Islam. And that tasawwuf which takes you away from the rough and tumble of life, which wants you to ignore Sharia, has no basis in Islam. That is a pagan or Greek or Persian imposition, deviation. But the real tasawwuf is Islam. It is integral to Islam. Islamic movement must try to achieve it. Each worker of our earth must have that sweetness, that capacity of moral blossoming, moral flavor, moral fragrance. Then you will attract not only local people, you will attract everyone. So that is what we should try to have.
Jazakallahu khairan for Prof. Khurshid Ahmad for coming and giving this talk and for taking the time out. Inshallah we'll end here and we'll pray God if everyone could make